Um, Whether it's Sunday morning or afternoon or Wednesday, I enjoy spending time in song. What we just sang for Song 3 and 4, those two songs were both from lament psalms. One of them was arranged in not a minor key. You probably heard the difference between Shield About Me and Psalm 4. I loved hearing all of the little voices that already knew Shield About Me. I mean, when a little kid's just turning it up to 11 for Hallelujah, oh, man, that is special. It's so special. And I can't help but in the moment while we're going through Psalm 4, which is a lot more somber, to also feel a special connection with little kids learning how to sing that way. I know that might sound weird, but again, if we are to build a culture that is different from a lost and dying culture around us, a culture that pushes down experiences like this, if we are to lament as a people, then we need to teach our children how to lament. And so by singing songs like that, and as they're kind of learning through listening, and we're singing how long, and by the second time around, little voices are, how long? And for them, I mean, kids have been lamenting how long their entire life. How long is this trip, right? How long will the preacher be up there? So many different ways that children lament. And now they get to sing it. So what a special time for me. I have got a lot of good feedback from you about this series in general, and that makes me excited to study it. And so thank you for the encouragement you've given me. I do appreciate it. It means a lot. This afternoon, we are going to approach the concept of the lament scriptures as a character study. So a bit different than what we did this morning. Instead of maybe looking at it theoretically or from that macro lens, we want to get really close to the lives of some people in the past who lamented. And we want to see what they did. And we want to see if there's a way that, in the same way that they lamented, can we copy that if it's appropriate for us? This is the QR code for the afternoon study. You could find lament_2_past laments. And what we're going to do is begin with an exposition of Psalm 77. It's a lament psalm, and it's powerful. We will not read all of it at the beginning. That way I can have a aha moment at the end. So we'll come back to it. We're going to do a refrain after we look at some past lamenters. And that says 4 past lamenters, but we will get the chance to say how long, because I actually added another one in between services. I went upstairs. I had to add one more. So it's 5 lamenters instead of 4, so that we could all scream out together, how long, Jonathan. Let's review. I have, 3 slides to review with, and I know we just did it this morning, but for the sake of maybe those who are watching on YouTube later on, and again, you've had lunch since then, so let's spend 3 slides together talking about things that we learned so far in this series. What's the point of lament scriptures? Well, they restore the sacred dignity of human suffering. They help believers process powerful emotions. They give voice to confusion when God's promises are incongruent with our lived experience. And finally, lament scripture brings a protest to God about something that may seem unjust at the time. Well, we want to consider that most of them follow a roadmap. And there are a few different parts to the lament psalms or the book of Lamentations, or when people are lamenting in Old Testament narratives. And usually what we'll see is that somebody is crying out to God and they're communicating an emotion or a struggle. They're pleading for help from the divine, but there's also a declaration of trust. That is why when we sing Psalm 4, it's such a powerful song, because it doesn't end on the minor key. It gives us the chance, after we've been able to cry out, how long will it be this way? We then sing, I can be sure of this. The Lord will answer when I call. And so it is in the Psalms. And finally, as we discussed, to lament is to struggle and then surrender. That was a better song this afternoon. We should have led that one for the invitation this morning, alas. And to struggle means to have pain and to have anger and have confusion, but instead of it resolving, the lament makes us feel at peace, not knowing the will of God about that specific event in our life. Now we enter Psalm 77. And we're going to look at the exposition of somebody who is in the midst of confusion. They are in the lament process, and we read a few verses from it this morning, maybe you recall. But what we're going to do is read about 12 verses of it, 14 to be exact, or 15 rather. And I know the text is small. Forgive me if maybe it's difficult to see, but I decided I wanted it all in one slide. And I am going to highlight it as we go. But you didn't get a handout, so I invite everyone to look up here and kind of process with me the roadmap of this psalm. Verse 1. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. What does that sound like? Well, that's a crying out. He says it. That's the easy part. Verse 2. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. Now, I'm going to continue to read it, but before I do, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, here is the communicated struggle. God's covenant people had received specific covenant promises. If you obey, if you will serve, then you will be rewarded, then you will be blessed. And this psalm is written in a time when the writer had obeyed, but had not been blessed. And in fact, something's going on that makes him struggle with God. Verse 3, when I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints, Selah. You hold my eyelids open. I'm so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Here he will cry out again with these questions. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has his anger shut up in his compassion? But now look how he finds trust. He finds trust in that past meditation. Wherever this psalmist is in the timeline, which I think he's around David. This is a psalm of Asaph, who was one of David's court musicians. He's able to look into the past of the Old Testament at what God did, and he found comfort there. Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You've made known your might among the peoples. You, with your arm, redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Now, he has a specific event in mind, and I'm going to keep us from reading it yet, so don't look ahead in your Bible. We'll come back to it in the refrain. He is in the present, looking into the past and going, oh, that's the answer. God is great. And even in my present distress, if I don't have the answer, I can look back and see that God has been there for his covenant people. So in my moment, I'm satisfied. That's what we're going to do. Romans 15 verse 4 says, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the Scriptures, we may have hope. So with that New Testament admonition that Christians ought to look to the past, let's look at some different lamenters. We'll consider Job, Tamar, David, the Shunammite, and wailing women. And what we will do in these is we'll have a vignette for each of them, meaning it won't be a complete overview of every part of their life. We're only looking at the place where they're lamenting. So if I leave you agitated and wanting more, great. Go study their life on your own time. Let's begin. Many of us may be familiar with Job. About, 6 months to a year ago, Adam led a sermon on that. Is that right? 6 months to a year-ish? And so go look that up on our YouTube page if you want to have a study about this man's life. To summarize it quickly, he's lost everything. There it is. He's lost everything. And now it's time for him to speak. So we're going to look at Job chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, where he opens his mouth. It says, "After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, 'Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let the day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it.'" His first words are, "I wish that I was dead." Now, I have a struggle with Job. I'm not certain how I feel about him through the whole book. Some of you have a different conviction than I do. I know you look at him as a hero of faith. I'm just not convinced. However, I don't think he's a villain either. I just think he is a man who is full in lament, struggling with God. What would your response be if a friend came to you and said, "I wish that I had never been born"? Well, Marlboro Man, who we met this morning, probably would have said, "Suck it up, Buttercup." Right? I think it would be easy for us to try to reframe or put a spin on it like, well, God has a plan for you. You don't want to wish to be dead. Or, if you trust in how God's going to get you through this, you don't know what it's going to be like on the other side. Which are fine. I'm not saying they're wrong. But lament is the ability to express anguish and have a strong faith. And if you think that somebody who says, "I wish I was dead," only people with weak faith do that, you haven't met Job, who was so great that in all of creation, God wanted to show him off to the devil and to creation. He's the best of the best of us. And he's the one that's saying, "I wish that I was dead." I would just say, and if you're taking notes, I encourage you to write this thought down. It takes more faith and trust and risk to express your lament to God than it does to push your feelings down. Pushing your feelings down is easier than opening them up to God. And does it merely end in despair? No. Where does Job end? Job gets angry with God. He is in despair with God. He converses with God. He draws near to God. He's rebuked by God. But Job seeks connection in all of the times that he laments. That's where we leave him. I told you, these are vignettes of people who are lamenting. Let's look at Tamar. Tamar is a tragic figure in 2 Samuel 13 who speaks some, but her lament is not recorded as far as her words. It's her actions that are recorded. In 2 Samuel 13, her half-brother Amnon brutally rapes her. And it says that he loved her, which I think we can interpret as he lusted after her, because after he had finished with her, it says that his hatred was greater for her than his love. So whatever lust he had for this woman, the contempt and the guilt and the shame and all that stuff that's mixed up in Amnon, he hated her after it was over. He called the young men, as the scripture says, who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. Now, not only had she vocalized, "Don't do this, this is not good," but after he was done and wanted to kick her out, she said, "Don't do that either. Talk to the king. Perhaps there's a way that we can patch this up." He doesn't listen to her the second time and bolts the door after her. And now she's left on the street, a virgin daughter of the king, with garments that would express that she is a virgin daughter of the king, right? She immediately, in verse 19, it says, Tamar put ashes on her head, tore the long robe that she wore. She laid her hand on her head and went away crying aloud as she went. This isn't hidden for her. This is a very public display to declare, I've been wronged. And I want others to know I've been wronged. Verse 20, her brother Absalom said to her, has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. I don't know what Absalom may have intended in that phrase, but to me there is not a lot of comfort. Shh, just be quiet. Now you and I know why Absalom did that, because he had revenge on his mind. He didn't want her to make a big deal about it because he was going to plot Amnon's downfall and kill him. But the story ends with her, it says, so Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. And we don't see an end where she offers trust or dedication to the Lord. This is an example, as far as we can tell, of somebody who publicly laments, but without the confidence of the Lord. Number 3, let's consider briefly King David. In 2 Samuel 15, 18, and then in Psalm 3. Now this morning we read a portion of it. This afternoon we sang a song, and we read the whole psalm earlier, so we ought to be familiar with it. But maybe you don't know the setting of when David wrote this. 2 Samuel 15, verse 30, David and his small entourage are fleeing Jerusalem because Absalom and the host have taken power, and they know that if they stay there, they're going to be killed. Now, I know that many of us maybe don't look forward to a family get-together where you know there might be some strife that year and think, oh, man, this is going to be a tough Thanksgiving. But I doubt any of us have ever gone to a Thanksgiving wondering, are one of my kids literally going to try to kill me? That's David. His son wanted him dead. Verse 30, but David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. Imagine being a farmer or a shepherd who is on the other hill watching this procession go by. It wouldn't take too much of an imagination to know this is a group of lamenters. They are lamenting. And it's at this point, with these actions in mind, that David writes, O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. That's why I think hearing the kids sing this song is so special, because it transported me to this event. You've got David and his men and some others there, and imagine kids among the group lamenting, but then somebody somewhere, David, starts singing, Thou, O Lord, and then the next person sings with him, are a shield about me. And suddenly the whole group in this lament are placing their trust in God. That's special. The one that we'll spend the most time on is an unnamed woman. She's known by her place of origin. She's a Shunammite in 2 Kings chapter 4. We read this story as a family a few weeks ago, and I thought, I have got to include this in a character study on lament. The main reason is she doesn't lament in public. Now, in the studies that I'm doing, I don't want us to take away that all of us have to lament to all of us all the time. I've said that in other sermon material before, but I say it again. I don't think it's practical for 150 people to be vulnerable with all 150. It's just not going to work. However, we should be able to look at 1, 2, or 3 of us and say, that's my people, my safe people who I'm able to be completely open and vulnerable with, and you'll see that the Shunammite does just that. To give you just a brief context, there's a prophet. His name is Elisha. Elisha happened to be passing through And this woman and her husband, who the scripture says they're barren, and if you have on the cultural glasses of a Jewish reader, you're going to know, oh, that's a big deal back then. They invite him to stay with their house. They're very hospitable. They build a little room up top just for him. And it says they even put a little bed, a little table, a little chair. So cute, right? And they make this space so that anytime the prophet comes through, he stays with them. And one time, he sees that they don't have children. He talks to them about it some, and then he prophesies that they will have, and miraculously, they have a kid. The little boy grows up. He's a preteen. And he's out in the field one day, and he has a brain aneurysm. At least that's the way I interpret it. He says, oh, my head, and falls. His dad picks him up, rushes the child back to the mother, and the mother is holding her son, and he dies in her arms. This is what happens. Then she called her husband and said, send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, that I may quickly go to the man of God and come back again. The husband, ever the logical thinker, says, why will you go to him today? It's neither new moon or Sabbath. Sorry, it's probably not funny, but to me it's just, their interaction is humorous. She does not lament with him. She says, all is well. Turns to the servant. She saddled the donkey and she said to her servant, urge the animal on. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. So you and I, the reader, when we read that second part, we know that all is not well. We already knew all was not well. The child was dead. But we know that she is not well, even though she said so. And yet, she hurries off to find the prophet Elisha. It says in verse 25, so she set out and came to Elisha at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, his servant, look, there's the Shunammite. Run at once to meet her and say to her, is all well with you? Is all well with your husband? Is all well with the child? And she answered, all is well. She doesn't lament with the servant. Interesting. It may seem like it's contradicting what I said this morning. I don't think so. I think they can work together just fine. There are situations where one publicly ought to lament, and that the group together can be in sorrow. And there's other times like this where she has a very specific mission in mind, and public lament isn't the best option. She finds him, and this is what happens. And I've highlighted her lament. When she came to the mountain to the man of God, she caught hold of his feet, and Gehazi came to push her away. But the man of God said, leave her alone, for she's in bitter distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. Then she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, do not deceive me? This is her crying out in protest. I didn't ask for this. And I said, don't lie to me. Don't give me that hope. And you gave it to me. And now my son is gone. The prophet says, go on back and everything will work out, more or less. But part of her lament is that trust and that confidence. And look what she says. Then the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. Her confidence and her trust in the lament is that, Elisha, I know you're a man of God, and so I'm not leaving the one who has the power to make things right. I'm staying with you. So he arose and followed her. Now, the main part of this story is that Elisha has the ability to raise the child from the dead. This is one of 3 events in the Old Testament where somebody is brought back to life from death. 3. Interesting. How many people did Jesus raise from the dead? It's a trivia fact for you. He raised 3. He was the Elisha to come. Anyway, we could talk a whole lot more about that, and we will on Sunday. Next Sunday, that is. Elisha raises this boy from the dead, and I love this. He summoned Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite. So he called her. And when she came to him, he said, pick up your son. But look what she did. She came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. That's private lament. Doesn't say it in there. I recognize that maybe I'm pulling it out of its context a bit. However, this is a woman who, when others were saying, hey, how's it going? It's fine. How are you? All's well. But to the one that she needed to cry out to, she cried out, I told you not to do this. Don't deceive me. And I'm not leaving you. I'm going to go with you. And when she's rewarded, she fell down at his feet to praise God for what he'd done. Okay. Our final vignette this afternoon are the wailing women of Jeremiah chapter 9. This is one of those that it's easy for me to, as I tell you from time to time, geek out on in the scriptures. We are going to read that, but before we do, I just want to show you how many times the wailing women appear in the Bible. It's not just one event. It's a lot. The wailing women were a cast of professional lamenters, and they were hired to come to funerals and other events that would require lamenting, and they would perform in such a way that the group could then grieve and mourn properly. In our culture, that might seem not very authentic, that we would pay people to come to our funeral and then cry and work us all up into a big cry. We would think that's not authentic. But it's not really that far off. We do call in singers, don't we? I've been called in and had to drive an hour or two to sing in somebody's funeral. I didn't know that person very well. And it's not too far off to think about paying someone to help you experience emotions. That's what I do as a therapist. People literally pay me money to come to my office and talk about their emotions. So we're not too far away from this, except that this group of women that would go around, they would then train people how to lament. And we don't do that. So that's one of the things I look on this with awe, is that in their services, it wasn't just about how they could lament and nobody else would, but they would come and teach you how. There's something therapeutic about calling in the wailing women because they help your family grieve. Look at the prophet as he speaks. Thus says the Lord of hosts, consider and call for the mourning women to come. Send for the skillful women to come. Let them make haste and raise a wailing over us, that our eyes may run down with tears and our eyelids flow with water. For a sound of wailing is heard from Zion. How we are ruined, we are utterly shamed because we have left the land, because they have cast down our dwellings. Hear, O women, the word of the Lord. So this is the prophet speaking on behalf of God to the wailing women to give this message to the community. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. Let your ear receive the word of his mouth. Teach to your daughters a lament, and each to her neighbor a dirge. Now, I have one highlighted here because it's the time that Jesus encountered the wailers. I know some of y'all are wanting me to say Bob Marley and the Wailers. I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's a fun band, right? In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus is brought into a place where a little girl has died, and they have brought in the wailers. And Jesus says, she's not dead, she's asleep. And the wailing party laughs. It could be because they don't have faith and they, mock him. And I think the scripture actually kind of implies that there is some mocking going on there. But I think part of what it is as well is their profession is about lamenting loss, and he's kind of getting in the way of what they're trying to do and teach people. And so, of course, they want to mock that. No, don't bury your emotions. Anyway. What they didn't understand, the wailing people of that particular story, was that there was a particular hope that Jesus brought so that Jesus' followers wouldn't need to lament in the same way ever again. And that's what we're going to talk about next Sunday morning, the lament and the gospel. There's a reason why you and I don't lament like Old Testament Hebrews. We have something that they never had. Come back and find out. Now, let's do a Psalm 77 refrain, and then I'll wrap it up. We've read these questions already, but I'm going to read them to you one more time. Starting in verse 9. Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. What mighty deed does Asaph, the writer, ponder? Verse 16. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. What event did Asaph look back to and say, that's the God that I serve? It's the Exodus crossing. And he's thinking about, wow, if God was so powerful then, and maybe even though I'm in this struggle that I don't understand, maybe I could trust in a God like that. That's what lament does. But I can't help reading Psalm 77 with eyes going forward and not just backwards. Want to know what I mean? I'm going to read some of the scriptures one more time. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. We don't lament like Old Testament Hebrews because of a risen Savior who had the power to walk on water. And I want to end with this quote and scripture. Again, maybe I haven't resolved everything about lament. I hope I haven't. I hope you're still somewhat agitated because you need more resolution. We have to continue next week in the series. But we finish with this slide. We believe that God is great enough to harbor our little lives with all their grievances, and that he can lead us through darkness to the other side. Then, through the semi-darkness, the light can begin to reveal, dimly pinned to a cross, the words of the Apostle Peter, cast all your anxiety upon him because he cares for you. That's where we're going to leave it. I want you all with your eyes fixed forward on Jesus, because as we're going to start looking at next Sunday, the lament and the resurrection offers us a completely different perspective to look at trials than Old Testament Hebrews had. We're going to end it right there. We do not want to close without having this opportunity for people to step forward and confess one of different things. First, it could be a confession of a desire to become a Christian. Maybe, especially one of you young kiddos or others here who would like to obey the gospel, this is a time where you can step forward in the song and let it be known that you'd like to be baptized. It's also a time for believers who have been convicted based on the word, in the sermon, in your Bibles, in conversations that have had today, where you felt convicted of sin. If you would like to come forward and confess that sin, and we will have prayer for you, it's an opportunity for either party. Please come as we stand and sing.